It all began that summer morning when the first contractions woke me up. The early sun's warmth was already sneaking through the slightly open window of our room on the third floor of that old building in downtown San Francisco. For months, Derek, my husband, had dismissed any discomfort I mentioned about my pregnancy. If I complained about back pain, he called it an exaggeration. If I was tired, he'd say, "Every pregnant woman goes through that, it's no big deal." But that morning, I knew something was different. I slowly sat up in bed, feeling sweat soaking the sheets against my skin. The bedside clock read 6:30 a.m. Derek was sleeping soundly beside me, softly snoring as usual. For a moment, I hesitated to wake him. Lately, any interruption to his sleep made him grumpy, and the last thing I needed was an argument. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves beginning to swell inside me. Could this be the day? Was our little Lucy ready to come into the world? We had chosen her name together during one of those rare moments of closeness we still shared. Lucy, just like my grandmother, the strongest woman I had ever known. Another contraction hit, this time more intense. I gritted my teeth, stifling a moan. I didn't want to alarm Derek just yet, not until I was sure. I carefully got up and made my way to the bathroom. The mirror reflected back a woman with deep-set eyes and tousled hair. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to clear my head. I decided to take a quick shower, hoping the warm water would ease the tension in my back. As the water streamed over me, I mentally reviewed the list of things we needed to take to the hospital. The bag had been packed weeks ago, prepared meticulously during one of those nesting sprees I'd had. Stepping out of the shower, another contraction caught me off guard. This time, I had to brace myself against the sink to keep my balance. The pain was sharper, more defined. There was no doubt now. This was real. I returned to the bedroom, where Derek still slept, oblivious to everything happening. I sat on the edge of the bed and gently touched his shoulder. "Derek," I whispered, "Derek, wake up. I think it's time." He stirred, grumbling something unintelligible. I insisted, a bit firmer this time. "Derek, please. The contractions have started." Finally, he opened his eyes, looking at me with a mixture of confusion and irritation. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. "I think the baby is coming," I replied, trying to keep calm. "I need you to take me to the hospital." Derek slowly sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Are you sure? It's not another false alarm like last week." His tone stung. Yes, we had been to the hospital the previous week, but the doctor had told us that false alarms were normal in the final weeks of pregnancy. I didn't understand why Derek seemed annoyed about it. "This is different," I insisted. "The contractions are stronger and regular." He sighed, clearly frustrated. He got out of bed and began dressing in silence. I watched him, a mix of anxiety and disappointment welling up inside me. Where was that excitement we'd shared when we found out I was pregnant? Where was the man who had cried with joy at our first ultrasound? As Derek got dressed, I tried to do the same. Every movement was a challenge, and the contractions didn't help. I put on a loose dress, one of the few that still fit me at this stage of my pregnancy. "Derek," I said as I slipped on my sandals, "can you grab the bag from the closet?" "It's upstairs." He nodded wordlessly and headed for the closet. While he was looking for the bag, his phone rang. I saw him tense up as he glanced at the screen. "It's my mom," he said before answering. I caught snippets of his conversation as I finished getting ready. Apparently, his parents were waiting for him for a weekend trip, a trip I knew nothing about. "Yes, Mom," I heard him say, "I'll be there in an hour." No change of plans. After he hung up, he looked at me with an expression that mixed guilt and determination. "Danielle," he began cautiously, "I have to go. My parents are waiting. We're heading to their beach house in Oakwood. It's my father's birthday, remember?" I froze. How could he be thinking of leaving at a time like this? "Derek," I pleaded, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm in labor. I need you to take me to the hospital." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, I'm sure there's still plenty of time. Why don't you call your sister? She can take you if things get serious." "I'll come back tomorrow afternoon." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt tears well up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief and anger. "You're really going to leave me alone at a time like this?" Derek looked ashamed for a moment, but that didn't change his mind. "Danielle, understand, I can't cancel this at the last minute. My dad has been planning this weekend for months. Besides, I'm pretty sure the baby isn't due yet. First labors always take forever." His words hit me like a slap. Since when had he become an expert on labor? And since when was his father's birthday more important than the birth of our daughter? Another contraction struck, so fierce that I doubled over in pain. Derek moved closer, but didn't touch me. He just stood there, as if unsure of what to do. "Please," I begged between gasps, "don't leave me alone in this." For a moment, I saw doubt in his eyes. For a second, I thought he might change his mind. But then his phone rang again. It was his mom. "I'm sorry, Danielle," he said as he grabbed his bag. "I'll call you when I get to Oakwood. You'll be fine, you'll see." And with that, he left the room. I heard him rush down the stairs as if he feared that staying 1 minute longer might make him change his mind. I stood there in the middle of our room, feeling my world crumble. The contractions kept coming, growing stronger, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional agony I was experiencing. How had we ended up like this? At what point had the man I fell in love with turned into this selfish, uncaring stranger? As I listened to the sound of his car engine starting and receding, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait around for someone to rescue me. If Derek didn't want to be part of this, then fine, I'd manage on my own. Determined, I grabbed the bag Derek had brought down from the closet and headed for the door. Every step was a challenge, but I was resolute. Our daughter was coming, with or without her father, and I was going to be strong for both of us. As I closed the door to our apartment, I couldn't help but think I was also closing a chapter in my life. Whatever came next would be different, and I was ready to face it. I accepted my fate. I didn't want to argue any longer. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, I reached for my phone to call a taxi service. We lived in Oakwood, a small town on the outskirts of San Francisco, and I knew it might be difficult to find a taxi at that early hour. While waiting for someone to answer, another contraction hit me hard. I clutched the back of a chair and breathed deeply, just as we had been taught in our childbirth classes. The classes Derek had only attended twice, always claiming he was too busy. "I'm sorry, ma'am," said the voice on the other end when someone finally answered. "We don't have any cars available in your area right now. One might be available in about 40 minutes, but I can't guarantee it." 40 minutes. The contractions were coming every 5 minutes. I couldn't wait that long. I looked out the window toward the garage where our old Seat Ibiza was parked. Derek had taken the new car, a Volkswagen we had bought just a few months ago, thinking it would be more comfortable for when the baby arrived. How ironic. I made up my mind. I was going to drive myself to the hospital. It wasn't ideal, I knew that, but what choice did I have? My sister lived on the other side of the city and would take over an hour to get here. I didn't have time to wait. With determination, I grabbed the keys to the seat and my purse. The hospital bag had already been stashed in the trunk for weeks, just in case. I'd never imagined that, just in case, would mean I'd be alone at a moment like this. I descended the stairs slowly, pausing on each landing to catch my breath between contractions. When I reached the garage, I felt utterly exhausted, and the real work was just beginning. The seat started on the second try, its engine coughing before settling into a steady rhythm. The car smelled of smoke and that pine air freshener Derek loved so much. For a moment, the familiar scent comforted me. I cautiously drove out of the garage, glancing both ways on the empty street. It was barely 7:30 a.m., and the neighborhood was just waking up. I saw Mrs. Martin, our neighbor, walking her dog. She waved at me, unaware of anything amiss. How could she be? From the outside, everything looked normal. No one could imagine the whirlwind of emotions and pain I was enduring. I navigated the streets of Oakwood, heading for I-80, the highway that would take me directly to Faith Medical Center. The traffic was light at that hour, a small mercy. Every few minutes, I had to take deep breaths and focus to keep control of the car as another contraction hit. About 10 minutes onto the highway, it happened. A particularly strong contraction caught me off guard. The pain was so intense that for a moment I saw stars. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. The car swerved, and for a terrifying second, I thought I was going to crash. I managed to regain control and, with my heart pounding wildly, pulled onto the shoulder. The tires screeched on the asphalt as I slammed on the brakes. Once the car stopped, I slumped over the wheel, gasping for breath. "Come on, Danielle," I whispered to myself between ragged breaths. "You can do this. Just a little more." But I knew I was lying to myself. I couldn't keep driving like this. It was too dangerous, not just for me, but for other drivers and, most of all, for my baby. I glanced around. The highway stretched out empty and silent before me. In the distance, the San Francisco skyline shimmered, yet it felt so far away. I had never felt so alone. With trembling hands, I fumbled for my phone. I had to try once more. I dialed Derek's number, praying this time he would answer. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each ring felt like a stab to my heart. "The number you're calling is switched off or out of service," the automated voice intoned. I hung up, tears beginning to roll down my cheeks. How could he have left me like this? How could he be so calm, enjoying time with his family, while I was here alone and terrified? Anger and pain mixed inside me, forming a tight knot in my throat. Another contraction hit, this one accompanied by an unfamiliar pressure. Panic surged through me. What if the baby was born here in the car in the middle of the highway? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I remembered what the midwife had told us in class. Panic would only make things worse. I had to stay calm for my baby. I checked the dashboard clock. It was 8:15. The sun was fully up now, and I could feel the heat building inside the car. I rolled down the window, grateful for the cool breeze that entered. I decided to call emergency services. Perhaps they could send an ambulance. I dialed 911 and waited, praying someone would answer quickly. 911? What's your emergency? A calm female voice asked. I'm in labor, I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. I'm on I-80, heading towards San Francisco, near mile marker 6. I can't keep driving. The operator asked several questions about my condition and the frequency of my contractions. She assured me that an ambulance was on its way, though it might take 15 or 20 minutes. Stay in the car, ma'am, she advised. Try to remain calm and breathe deeply. If you feel the need to push, call us immediately. I hung up, feeling only a slight reassurance. At least now I knew help was coming. But 20 minutes felt like an eternity. I tried to distract myself by gazing at the passing scenery. In the distance, fields of orange groves bordered the city. The sky was a deep, cloudless blue, what would have been a beautiful view at any other time. Now, it only underscored how alone I was. Cars whizzed by. Some drivers glanced at me with curiosity, but no one stopped. I couldn't blame them. Who would pull over on a busy highway to help a stranger? Another contraction struck, even stronger than before. This time, I couldn't hold back a scream. The pain was overwhelming, as if someone were trying to tear me in two. When it subsided, I realized I was drenched in sweat. I looked at the clock again. Only 5 minutes had passed since I called 911. Time seemed to slow down. Every second felt like an hour. Then, I felt something warm between my legs. With dread, I looked down and saw that the seat was wet. My water had broken. Panic surged anew. This was happening too fast. Where was the ambulance? Why was it taking so long? I tried to recall everything we'd learned in childbirth classes: deep breathing, relaxation, positive visualization. But it was hard to focus on anything positive when I was alone, scared, and in pain. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine I was somewhere else, perhaps at the beach, feeling the sand under my feet and listening to the sound of the waves, or back home in my bed with Derek by my side, holding my hand and reassuring me that everything would be all right. But the reality was starkly different. I was here, in this old seat, with the noise of traffic as my only company, about to give birth to my first daughter. I opened my eyes and looked at my belly. Despite the fear and pain, I felt a surge of love for the tiny life about to enter the world. "Come on, Lucy," I whispered, placing a hand on my stomach. "Just a little more. Mom's here with you." At that moment, I heard the sound of a siren in the distance. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the flashing lights of an approaching ambulance. Never before had that sound seemed so beautiful. The ambulance pulled up behind my car and 2 paramedics quickly jumped out. A middle-aged woman approached my window. "Miss Danielle?" she asked. I nodded, unable to speak as another contraction hit. "Don't worry, we're here to help. We're taking you to the hospital right now." They carefully helped me out of the car and onto a stretcher. As they loaded me into the ambulance, I glanced back at the seat, left abandoned on the shoulder, a symbol of everything I was leaving behind. As the ambulance sped away with its sirens blaring, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief because I was finally receiving help. Sorrow because, at one of the most important moments of my life, I was surrounded by strangers instead of my family. But as the paramedic took my hand and reassured me that everything would be fine, I felt something inside me grow stronger. Maybe I was alone, but I was going to be strong. For me and for Lucy. Because from now on, we were a team and nothing and no one would tear us apart. While I sat by the roadside, feeling utterly abandoned, a car pulled up a few meters away. The roar of its engine subsided to a gentle purr, then died completely. For a moment, I froze, unsure of what to expect. The driver's door opened, and a woman in her 40s stepped out quickly. She had chestnut hair tied back in a messy ponytail and was wearing a t-shirt celebrating the annual Tomato Festival, a nod to a beloved local celebration. She approached me with concern etched on her face, her brown eyes scanning the situation. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" she asked with an accent that hinted at her roots. At that moment, all the strength I'd tried to hold onto vanished. The tears I'd been keeping in check began to flow uncontrollably, and through sobs, I managed to choke out, "I'm in labor. My husband left me. I don't know what to do." The woman, whom I later learned was named Laura, reacted with a calm and determined assurance that surprised me. Without a second thought, she stepped closer and placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry, sweetheart. We're going to get through this together, okay?" she said with a comforting smile. "I'm Laura. What's your name?" "Danielle," I managed between hiccups. "All right, Danielle. We're getting you to the hospital right now. Can you walk to my car?" I nodded weakly. Laura helped me to my feet, supporting most of my weight as we slowly made our way to her vehicle, a fairly new red Renault Clio. "What about my car?" I suddenly remembered I left it on the shoulder. "Don't worry about that now," Laura replied as she opened the passenger door. "We'll call a tow truck once we're at the hospital. The important thing is you and the baby." She helped me sit and adjusted the seats so I could be as comfortable as possible. Then she hopped into the driver's seat and merged into traffic. "Which hospital are we heading to?" she asked as she joined the flow. "Faith Medical Center," I replied, feeling another contraction building. Laura nodded and pressed the accelerator. "I know a shortcut. We'll get there in no time." As she drove, Laura began speaking to me in a warmth I hadn't felt in months. Her voice was soft and soothing, like a warm blanket on a cold night. "Listen, Danielle, you're going to be all right. Breathe with me, okay? Inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. That's it, very good." I followed her instructions, grateful to have something else to focus on besides the pain and fear. Laura continued talking, her voice anchoring me amidst the storm of emotions. "Is this your first child?" she asked. I nodded, unable to speak as another contraction overwhelmed me. "Mine was an adventure too," she said with a smile in her tone. 15 years ago now, but I remember it like it was yesterday. My son, Alex, decided he wanted to be born right in the middle of the county fair. Imagine, me in labor while the streets were closed off for all the festivities. I couldn't help but let out a small laugh despite the pain. The image of a woman in labor trying to navigate through a festival was undeniably comical. Laura kept sharing stories as she drove, alternating between humorous anecdotes of her own birth experience and practical advice on breathing and relaxation. Her presence was like a balm, soothing my nerves and distracting me from the pain. "You know," she said at one point, "this might not be how you planned it, but believe me, everything happens for a reason. Look at me, for example. If I hadn't taken the highway instead of the main road today, we might never have met." Her words made me reflect. It was true. Nothing had gone as planned. In my dreams, Derek was by my side, holding my hand and whispering words of encouragement. In reality, it was a stranger giving me the support I so desperately needed. "Laura, I managed between contractions. I don't know how to thank you." "You didn't have to stop to help me," she interrupted with a wave of her hand. "Don't be silly. How could I leave you there? This is what we women do. We support each other." Her words touched me deeply. In that moment, I felt a connection with Laura that went beyond our brief encounter. It was a sisterhood, a mutual understanding that transcended time and familiarity. As we drove through the streets of San Francisco, with Faith Medical Center drawing nearer, Laura continued sharing details about her life. She talked about her son Alex, now a teenager passionate about football and his family's famous homemade pie, and about her work as an elementary school teacher in the vibrant downtown district, each day an adventure with her students. "You know what?" she said suddenly. "I think you should name your daughter Laura. It's such a beautiful name." I let out a small laugh that quickly turned into a groan as another contraction hit. "Sorry," Laura said, her tone mixing concern with humor. "Bad timing for jokes. But seriously, have you decided on a name yet?" "Lucy," I managed when I could speak again. "Her name will be Lucy." "Lucy," Laura repeated. "It's a beautiful name. It means light, you know? And I truly believe that's exactly what she'll be for you, a light in the darkness." Her words brought tears to my eyes again, but this time they were tears of hope, gratitude, a strange mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity but was really only about 20 minutes, we arrived at Faith Medical Center. Laura parked at the emergency entrance and dashed off to get help. Within minutes, I was surrounded by nurses and doctors. They wheeled me onto a stretcher and began asking about my condition, the frequency of my contractions, and whether my water had broken. Amid the chaos, I searched for Laura. I spotted her standing by the side with a calm smile. "Laura," I called out. She came over quickly. "Thank you," I said, taking her hand. "Thank you for everything." "There's nothing to thank me for, Danielle," she replied, squeezing my hand. "Now focus on bringing little Lucy into the world. I'll be here if you need me." As they wheeled me into the hospital, I looked back one last time. There was Laura, standing at the entrance, waving goodbye. In that moment, I felt that everything was going to be all right. The next hours were a whirlwind of pain, effort, and intense emotion. The labor was long and difficult, but I never felt alone. The nurses and doctors were wonderful, encouraging and guiding me every step of the way. And, to my surprise and joy, Laura kept her promise. She stayed at the hospital the entire time, patiently waiting in the lounge. Every now and then, a nurse would bring me words of encouragement from her. Finally, after nearly 12 hours of labor, I heard the most beautiful cry in the world. My little Lucy had arrived, her powerful cry filling the room and my heart with indescribable joy. When they placed her in my arms for the first time, everything else faded away, the pain, the fear, the hurt from Derek's absence, all vanished at the sight of that tiny, wrinkled face and those curious eyes. "Hello, Lucy," I whispered, tears of happiness streaming down my cheeks. "Welcome to the world, my love." A few minutes later, after they had cleaned us up and settled us in, a nurse asked if I wanted any visitors. I nodded, thinking of Laura. When the door opened, it was indeed Laura who entered. Her eyes lit up when she saw Lucy and me. "Oh, Danielle," she said softly as she approached the bed. "She's beautiful." I smiled, overwhelmed with gratitude toward this woman who had been my savior. "Would you like to hold her?" Laura eagerly nodded. Carefully, I placed Lucy in her arms. Laura looked at her with adoration, gently rocking her. "Hello, little Lucy," she murmured. "You're a fighter, you know? Just like your mom." Watching Laura cradle my daughter, I felt that something fundamental had changed in my life. I had entered that hospital feeling alone and abandoned, but now I felt stronger than ever. Lucy was my light, just as Laura had said. And thanks to the kindness of a stranger, I now knew I would never truly be alone. There was a sisterhood, a support network that went beyond family and friends. It was the power of women standing by one another, and it was stronger than I had ever imagined. Just as we were about to head inside the hospital, my phone began to ring. The sound startled me, shattering the bubble of calm that Laura had so carefully created with her conversation. With trembling hands, I fished my phone out of my purse. I looked at the screen and saw Derek's name. My heart skipped a beat. For a moment, I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to ignore the call, to let him feel even a fraction of the anguish I had experienced. But another part, the part that still remembered the man I had fallen in love with, urged me to answer. "Answer it," Laura said softly, noticing my hesitation. "Whatever it is, it's better to know." I nodded and swiped to answer. "Hello," I said, my voice still weak from pain and conflicting emotions. "Danielle." "Finally, you answer." Derek's voice was frantic, almost unrecognizable. "Where are you?" "You need to come home right now." His tone of panic confused me. Had he forgotten he'd abandoned me at the very moment I was about to give birth? How dare he demand that I come home? "Derek, what are you talking about?" I managed to say through gritted teeth, feeling anger replacing my initial surprise. "It's crazy, Danny. I got home to my parents' place and there was a man waiting for me. A huge guy. He looked like a thug. He handed me a letter and said I had to return to San Francisco immediately. He said it's a matter of life and death." His words left me stunned. A man? A letter? Nothing he said made sense. "Derek, calm down and explain what's going on," I said, trying to keep my composure. "I don't know, Danny. The letter, it's from my father. But not my current dad, it's from years ago. It's as if he wrote it in the past and saved it to be given to me today. It says things, horrible things. About a debt, about dangerous people. It says I have to protect you and the baby. Danny, I'm terrified." I felt as though the ground had opened beneath me. Derek's words echoed in my mind, but I couldn't make sense of them. A letter from the past? Debts? Dangerous people? It was like waking up in the middle of a suspense movie. "Derek," I said, trying to steady myself, "I'm on my way to the hospital. The baby is coming." There was silence on the other end. When Derek spoke again, his voice was filled with remorse. "Oh, God, Danny. I'm so sorry. I should be there with you. I'm an idiot. I'm coming over right now." But at that moment, another contraction slammed into me. I let out an involuntary cry, the pain clouding my thoughts. "Danielle, what's happening? Are you all right?" Derek's voice sounded distant, almost unreal. Laura looked at me with concern, yet kept the car steady. We were pulling into the hospital parking lot. "Derek, I managed once the pain subsided. I have to hang up. The baby is coming." "Wait, Danny, don't hang up. I need to know you're safe. The man from the letter, he said they might come after you. Danny, please." But I couldn't focus on his words any longer. The pain was too overwhelming, and the confusion only worsened everything. "It's too late now, Derek," I replied before hanging up. In that moment, I understood that his desperation wasn't for me, or even for our baby. It was about something beyond his control, a consequence of his own selfish choices. Laura parked the car and quickly came out to help me. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine worry. I nodded weakly, unable to speak. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. On one hand, the escalating pain of labor. On the other, Derek's words that sounded like something out of a mystery novel. As Laura helped me out of the car, I couldn't help but marvel at how surreal everything was. Just hours ago, my biggest concern had been getting to the hospital on time. Now, suddenly, there was a mysterious threat, a letter from the past and a remorseful, frightened Derek. Soon, nurses arrived with a wheelchair and helped me sit. Laura quickly explained the situation as they wheeled me inside. "Your husband will be on his way," I heard Laura say. But there are complications. Complications, a simple word to describe the chaos that had unraveled in just a few hours. Once I was settled in a room and the medical team began preparing for the delivery, my mind wouldn't stop racing. What did that letter, which had terrified Derek so much, say? Who was that mysterious man? And most importantly, were my baby and I really in danger? But every time I tried to focus on those questions, another contraction yanked me back to the immediate reality. The baby was coming, and nothing else mattered at that moment. Laura stayed by my side the entire time, holding my hand and offering encouragement. Her presence was like an anchor, keeping me grounded when everything else seemed to be falling apart. "Breathe, Danielle," she gently said. "Focus on your baby. Everything else can wait." And she was right. As the labor progressed, my fears and questions receded into the background. Every fiber of my being was dedicated to bringing my daughter into the world. Hours passed in a blur of pain, effort, and determination. At one point, I heard a commotion outside the room, Derek's voice demanding to see me, and the firm tone of a nurse denying him access. "I'm sorry, sir," I heard her say. "Your wife is in full labor. You can't come in now." A part of me felt relieved. I wasn't ready to face him, to hear his excuses and fears, not when I was on the verge of becoming a mother. Time seemed to both slow down and race at once. And then, suddenly, I heard the most beautiful cry in the world. My daughter, my little Lucy, had arrived. When they placed her in my arms, all the confusion, fear, and pain melted away. It was just her and me now, bonded by a love so profound it felt as if it had always existed. "Hello, my love," I whispered, tears of joy streaming down my cheeks. "Welcome to the world." Laura, who had witnessed it all, was crying too. "She's beautiful, Danielle," she said, her voice full of emotion. "You were so brave." Holding Lucy, I felt a strength and determination I'd never known before. No matter what was happening outside that room, no matter the mysterious threats or letters from the past, I would protect my daughter with every fiber of my being. After a while, once they had cleaned us up and settled us, a nurse approached me with a serious look. "Your husband is outside," she said. "He's quite upset. Do you want to see him?" I looked at Lucy, sleeping peacefully in my arms, and then at Laura, who gave me a supportive glance. I took a deep breath. "Yes," I finally said. "Let him come in." When Derek entered the room, I barely recognized him. He was disheveled, clearly sleepless. His eyes reflected guilt, but also fear. Standing at the door, he hesitated, looking at me and Lucy with a mix of love, terror, and remorse. "Danny," he said, his voice breaking, "I'm so sorry." I don't even know where to begin." "Then don't begin," I replied, surprising even myself with the firmness in my voice. "Now isn't the time, Derek. If you want to meet your daughter, come closer. But if you're here to talk about mysterious letters and threats, I suggest you leave the way you came." Derek seemed to shrink under my words. He took a hesitant step toward the bed, his eyes fixed on Lucy. She's beautiful," he whispered. "Yes, she is," I answered. "And she deserves parents who can rise to the occasion. So I suggest you think very carefully about what you do and say from now on, Derek. Because it's no longer just about us." I saw tears well up in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, seemingly at a loss for words. Laura, who had been watching silently, cleared her throat. "I think I'll give you both a moment alone," she said as she headed toward the door. Before she left, I called out, "Laura, thank you for everything." She smiled warmly. "You're welcome, Danielle. I'll be right outside if you need me." After the door closed behind her, I turned to Derek. "All right," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Now you're going to explain exactly what's going on. And it'd better be the complete truth, Derek. Because I swear, if anything threatens our daughter, I won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to protect her, even if that means keeping her away from you." Derek sank into the chair next to the bed, his face a mask of guilt and fear. As he began to speak, I felt we were teetering on the edge of a precipice, about to plunge into a world unknown. But as I looked at Lucy, I knew I'd find the strength to face whatever came. For her, for me, for our future. When we arrived at the hospital, everything happened so fast. Laura stayed by my side the entire time, as if we'd been lifelong friends. The medical staff attended to me with professionalism, and despite the excruciating pain, I discovered a strength within me I never knew existed. They took me to the delivery room, a place that initially felt cold and sterile, but would soon become the stage for the most important moment of my life. Nurses moved with precision, preparing everything needed. Laura remained with me, holding my hand and whispering words of encouragement. "You're doing so well, Danielle," she said. "Breathe deeply, that's it. With every contraction, you're closer." The pain was intense, unlike anything I had ever experienced. Each contraction was like a wave, building until I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, then receding and leaving me gasping and exhausted. But with each wave, I felt one step closer to meeting my daughter. Time seemed to distort. I couldn't tell if minutes or hours had passed. Only the present existed, the pain, the determination, and the anticipation. At one point, I heard the doctor say, "I can see the head, Danielle. With the next contraction, I need you to push with all your might." I summoned every ounce of energy I had left. I felt Laura's hand squeezing mine, heard her encouraging voice, and I pushed. I pushed as if my life depended on it, channeling all the pain and frustration of the past months into that single effort. And then, suddenly, the pain gave way to a sensation of release. I heard a sharp, loud cry fill the room. My heart skipped a beat. "It's a beautiful baby girl," the doctor announced with a smile in her voice. Hours later, with one final effort, I heard my daughter's cry echoing through the room. Tears streamed down my face as they placed her in my arms. She was perfect. All the pain, all the anguish, all the abandonment, it was all worth it in that moment. That tiny life was everything. I gazed at her in wonder. She had a tuft of dark hair clinging to her little head. Though her eyes were puffy from birth, they shone a deep blue. Her tiny hands flailed as if trying to grasp the whole world. "Hello, Lucy," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "I'm your mom. I've been waiting for you." Laura, who had witnessed it all, was crying too. "She's gorgeous, Danielle," she said with a warm smile. "You were so brave." Without her, I don't know how I would have made it to the hospital in time. I felt an immense gratitude toward that stranger who had become my savior at the most critical moment of my life. "Laura," I said, my voice hoarse from the effort, "thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you." She smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "There's nothing to thank me for, Danielle. I'm just happy I could be here for you." The nurses took Lucy for a brief cleaning and examination. I used that time to rest a little, feeling exhaustion take over my body. Laura stayed with me, recounting stories of her own birth to keep me distracted. "You know," she said at one point, "when my son Alex was born, I thought my heart would burst from love. It's a feeling that can't really be put into words, right?" I nodded, unable to articulate the enormity of what I was feeling. It was as if a part of me I never knew existed had suddenly come alive. When they brought Lucy back, clean and swaddled in a soft blanket, I felt my heart expand even further. I cradled her, marveling at how small and perfect she was. "Would you like to hold her?" I asked Laura. Her eyes lit up. "May I?" "I'd love to." Gingerly, I handed Lucy over. Laura cradled her effortlessly, rocking her gently as she whispered sweet words. "Hello, little Lucy," she murmured. "You're a fighter, you know? Just like your mom." Seeing them together filled me with an indescribable emotion, a blend of gratitude, love, and a strange sense of belonging. In that moment, I felt that something fundamental had changed in my life. The following hours passed in a blur of medical checkups, nurse visits, and quiet moments with Lucy. Laura stayed with me the entire time, helping me with the first feedings and offering advice on baby care. "Remember," she said at one point, "don't be afraid to ask for help. Motherhood is wonderful, but it can be exhausting. You don't have to do it all alone." Her words resonated deeply within me. I had come into that hospital feeling abandoned, but now I felt stronger than ever. I had Lucy, I had Laura, and for the first time in a long time, I felt capable of facing whatever life threw my way. That night, as the nurses suggested I get some rest, Laura offered to stay with me, but I insisted she go home to rest. "You've done more than enough," I told her. "Go home with your family. We'll be okay." She hesitated for a moment, then finally nodded. "All right, but I'll be back first thing in the morning. And if you need anything at all, call me, okay?" I nodded, grateful for her concern. Before leaving, Laura leaned over and softly kissed Lucy's forehead. "Good night, little fighter," she whispered. Once she left, I was alone with Lucy for the first time. The room was silent except for the gentle sounds of my daughter's breathing. I looked at her, feeling an overwhelming mix of love and sudden fear. How was I going to care for this little one? How would I protect her from all the things that could go wrong? Then Lucy opened her eyes and looked at me. In that moment, every doubt vanished. I knew I'd do anything for her. I would face any obstacle. Because she was my light, just as Laura had said. I thought of Derek, of the frantic call I'd received. What did it all mean? What dangers were looming over us? For a moment, fear threatened to engulf me again. But then I looked at Lucy and felt a fierce determination grow inside me. No matter what came our way, we would face it together. That night, as Lucy slept peacefully in her little crib next to my bed, I reflected on everything that had happened. I had entered that hospital as a scared and abandoned woman, and now I felt like a lioness, ready to protect her cub against any threat. I thought of Laura and her selfless kindness. She had shown me that there was still goodness in the world, that I wasn't as alone as I once believed. Thanks to the compassion of a stranger, I now knew I would never truly be alone. There was a sisterhood, a network of support that went beyond family and friends. It was the power of women standing together, stronger than I'd ever imagined. As sleep began to overtake me, I looked at Lucy one last time. "I love you," I whispered. "And I promise that no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." With that promise in my heart, I drifted off to sleep, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Because now I had a purpose, a reason to be stronger than ever before. I had Lucy, and that changed everything. Dawn found me awake, feeding Lucy. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, bathing the room in a soft, golden glow. As I looked at my daughter, I felt a peace I hadn't known in a long time. I knew the challenges were not over. We still had to face whatever had frightened Derek so badly. We still had to navigate the uncharted waters of parenthood. But for the first time in a long while, I felt ready. Because now I had Lucy. She was my light, my strength, my reason to carry on. With her in my arms, I felt I could conquer the world. And so, with the rising sun as our witness, we began our first day together, a new chapter in our lives, filled with promises, challenges, and above all, love. A love so deep and powerful that I knew it would carry us through any storm. This was not the end of our story. It was only the beginning. The next day, Derek showed up at the hospital. He was disheveled and clearly hadn't slept. His eyes carried guilt, but also fear. As soon as he stepped through the door, he started stammering about a man who had threatened him, a letter he'd found at home, and a long-buried secret now brought to light. I was sitting on my hospital bed, with Lucy sleeping peacefully in my arms. Laura had stepped out a few minutes earlier to grab a coffee, promising to return soon. When I saw Derek enter, a whirlwind of emotions overtook me: relief, anger, confusion, and a strange sense of distance, as if the man before me were a stranger. "Danielle," he said, his voice rough and trembling, "I'm so sorry." I don't even know where to start. I didn't reply immediately. I had no energy for his excuses. All I could think about was Lucy, what she needed from me, and the promise I'd made to never let anyone abandon us like that again. Derek took a hesitant step toward the bed, his eyes fixed on the tiny bundle in my arms. Is that her?" he asked in a barely audible whisper. I nodded, at a loss for words. Derek came closer, his eyes full of wonder and what appeared to be remorse. "She's beautiful," he said, extending a trembling hand toward Lucy, but stopping short as if afraid he had no right to touch her. Finally, I found my voice. "Derek," I said, my tone firmer than I expected, "I need you to explain exactly what's going on. And this time, I want the complete truth." He nodded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. He sat in the chair beside the bed, his posture slumped as if carrying the weight of the world. "It all started years ago," he began, his voice low and laden with shame. "Before I met you, my father, he wasn't the man you thought you knew. He had debts, many debts, and not with the right people." He paused, searching for the right words. I watched him silently, gently rocking Lucy, who was starting to stir in her sleep. One day, he came home with a large sum of money. He said that all our problems were solved. I was young, Danielle. I didn't ask any questions. I was just happy that things were getting better. Derek looked up, his eyes meeting mine. But that money came at a price. A price we didn't realize until yesterday. A shiver ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" I asked, though a part of me dreaded the answer. "The letter," he said, pulling out a crumpled envelope from his pocket. "My father wrote it years ago, with instructions that it be delivered to me yesterday. In it explains everything." With trembling hands, Derek opened the envelope and began to read. "Dear Derek, if you are reading this, it means the time I feared has come. The money I secured years ago wasn't a loan, as I led you to believe. It was payment for a job I couldn't finish. There are dangerous people, my son. People who never forget or forgive. I have spent years trying to protect you, keeping this a secret. But I knew that someday they would come to collect. If you are reading this, that day has arrived. I need you to be strong, Derek. I need you to protect your family, because they will come for you, for yours. It's the price we must pay for my mistakes. I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry." Dad, when Derek finished reading, the silence in the room was deafening. It felt as though the floor had opened beneath me. Everything I thought I knew, every plan for my life, was crumbling before my eyes. "What does this mean, Derek?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who are they? What do they want?" Derek shook his head, his eyes filled with desperation. "I don't know, Danielle. I swear I didn't know until yesterday. The man who delivered the letter said they'd come back. That we must be ready." At that moment, Lucy began to cry. The nurse soothed her softly while whispering reassuring words. Derek looked at us, his eyes a mix of love and fear. "I'm so sorry, Danielle," he said, his voice breaking. "I never meant to put you in danger. Not either of you. I don't know what to do." I looked at him, feeling both compassion and frustration. This man, who just the day before had abandoned me when I needed him most, now seemed as lost and scared as a child. "Derek," I said firmly yet kindly, "I understand you're scared. I am too. But now we have a daughter. A daughter who needs us strong and united." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I know. And I promise I'll do everything I can to protect you both. But how can you even look at me after what you did yesterday?" I sighed, glancing at Lucy, now calm and sleeping peacefully. "I won't lie, Derek. I'm hurt and angry that you left when I needed you most. But now, we have bigger problems to face." Just then, the door opened and Laura stepped in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She froze when she saw Derek. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, stepping back. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "No, Laura. Please stay," I said, grateful for her steady presence. "Derek, this is Laura. She helped me get to the hospital yesterday." Derek stood and extended a trembling hand toward Laura. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for being there when I couldn't." Laura shook his hand, her expression a mix of caution and understanding. "There's nothing to thank me for," she said. "Anyone would have done the same. But the 3 of us knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would have stopped to help a stranger in need. Not everyone would have stayed for hours, offering support and comfort. Laura was special, and in that moment, I felt her presence was more necessary than ever." "Laura," I said, "I know this is a lot to ask, but would you mind staying a little longer? I think we need your help." She nodded without hesitation. "Of course, Danielle. I'm here for whatever you need." And so, in that small hospital room, With Lucy sleeping in my arms, Derek by my side, and Laura as our witness, we began to formulate a plan. A plan to face whatever was coming, to protect our little family. I didn't know what the future held. I wasn't sure I could ever fully forgive Derek or trust him the way I once had. But looking at Lucy, I felt a fierce determination growing inside me. I would do whatever it took to keep her safe. Because now there were 3 of us. Or maybe 4, with Laura included. And together, we would face whatever came our way. Because the most unconditional love is born out of the instinct to protect your child, and that love, I discovered, was stronger than any threat, any fear, any obstacle. As the afternoon sun streamed through the hospital window, illuminating Lucy's sleeping face, I felt a strange mix of fear and hope. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew we would face it together. Because we were a family now, with all its imperfections and challenges. And that, I realized, was more than enough. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to face it. With Lucy in my arms, Derek by my side, willing to make amends, and Laura as an unexpected yet welcome support, I believed we could overcome anything. After all, what is life but a series of challenges that make us stronger? And with love as our guide, I was sure we'd find our way, no matter how dark the path seemed. So, as the day drew to a close and a new night settled over us, I allowed myself a moment of peace. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and battles. But for now, in this moment, we were simply a family. An imperfect, broken family, but a family nonetheless. And that, I discovered, was the greatest gift of all.